Okay, let's dive in. We're talking about an island that is, arguably one of the most talked about, most contentious places on the entire planet, Taiwan. It's become this massive flashpoint for global politics, for tech, for trade, and we're going to break down exactly why. So let's get right into it.
And the answer? It's Taiwan. I know it might look like a small island on a map, but its impact on your day-to-day life, and honestly, the entire global economy, it's just massive. I mean, the very device you're probably watching this on right now, yeah, it's a huge part of this story.
So why? What's the big deal? Well, here's a huge piece of the puzzle. Taiwan's factories, they pump out over half of the entire world's microchips. And look, we're not talking about just any chips. These are the top-of-the-line, most advanced semiconductors. The brains inside our phones, our computers, our cars, even our military hardware. All the biggest companies on Earth, they are totally, completely dependent on this one little island. And it's not just about what they make, it's about where it is. See that narrow strip of water between Taiwan and mainland China? That's the Taiwan Strait, and it is one of the most critical shipping lanes on the planet. Get this, a staggering 80% of all global container trade sails right through there. So yeah, whoever controls this island and those waters, they hold some serious world-altering cards. So how in the world did we get here? We've already touched on the island in your pocket. Next up, we're going to jump into the history with a tale of two Chinas, then the Great Diplomatic Switch. After that, we'll cover the chip revolution, its role as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and wrap it all up with the trillion-dollar standoff that we see today. Okay, so to really get what's happening now, we've got to rewind the clock. We're going back to a conflict that, believe it or not, technically never even ended. This is the story of how one single civil war ended up creating two rival governments, both pointing at each other and saying, nope, we're the real China. I mean, look at this. It's basically a mirror image. On one side, you've got Mao Zedong's communists. They won the war on the mainland, and they set up the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. On the other side, you have Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists. They lost, retreated to Taiwan, and kept their government going, the Republic of China, or ROC. Now here's the kicker. Both sides wrote into their own constitutions that they were the legitimate ruler of all of China, including the piece the other guy was sitting on. So here's the quick and dirty timeline of how it all went down. After this just brutal 22-year-long civil war, Mao's forces finally came out on top in 1949. So what did the other side do? Well, to avoid being completely wiped out, Chiang Kai-shek, his entire government, and something like 2 million of his followers, they packed up and fled across the strait to Taiwan, where they basically set up a government in exile. And for a long time, for decades actually, most of the world, including the UN, sided with Taiwan. They saw them as the real China. But then, everything changed. There was this huge pivotal moment where it felt like the entire world just flipped a switch. And wow, this chart really tells the story, doesn't it? Back in the early 70s, Taiwan's government had all the recognition. They were recognized by most of the big players. They even held China's permanent seat on the UN Security Council. But then, bam, 1971, the UN votes to kick them out and give that seat to Beijing. And you can see right here what happened next. Over the next 5 decades, as Beijing's power grew, formal recognition for Taiwan just evaporated. So why the big switch? Well, it boils down to 2 things, really: money and politics. Super practical. Beijing controlled a market of over 1 billion people. You can't just ignore that. For countries like the US, it was a double win, a strategic play against the Soviet Union and a golden ticket to a massive new economy. Beijing laid out a simple rule. You want to trade with us? Fine. But you can't officially recognize Taiwan. And honestly, that was a deal most of the world just couldn't say no to.
So, while Taiwan was losing all these diplomatic fights, something else was happening behind the scenes. They were quietly gearing up to win a totally different kind of war, the technology war. This is the incredible story of how this island went from making, cheap plastic toys and clothes to becoming the absolute, undisputed king of the most important tech in the 21st century.
And at the heart of this whole revolution is this one guy, Morris Chang. You can basically think of him as the Steve Jobs of microchips. He was born in China, goes to the US, gets educated at MIT, and climbs the ladder to become a top exec at Texas Instruments. Then, in 1985, Taiwan's government makes this genius move. They call him up and say, hey, come lead our tech push. So he does. He founds a company you've probably heard of, TSMC, and he comes up with this game-changing idea, a pure-play foundry.
a factory that doesn't design its own chips. It just manufactures chips for everyone else. And it wasn't just TSMC. An entire ecosystem of tech titans just exploded onto the scene. You've got companies like MediaTek. They design the chips in a massive chunk of the world's smartphones. And of course, names you know, like Asus and Acer. This deep web of connections into the global tech supply chain, well, that became Taiwan's best defense. It's what people now call its silicon shield. Okay, just to really put this into perspective for you, chew on this number for a second. 60%. 60% of the entire global auto industry depends on chips from that one company, TSMC. So if something disrupts them, it's not just about a shortage of iPhones. It means car factories in Detroit, in Germany, all over the world. They literally grind to a halt. Okay, so beyond the tech, Taiwan has this massive strategic value, especially for the United States. And this is not a new thing, by the way. This idea has been shaping American policy in Asia for like over 70 years. And this quote from the famous U.S. General Douglas MacArthur, it just nails the American military thinking. An unsinkable aircraft carrier. He saw its location as basically a permanent, unsinkable military base right off the coast of mainland Asia. A rock-solid asset in a really volatile part of the world. And when you look at a map, it just clicks. You can see exactly why. For the US, a friendly Taiwan is a critical link in this thing they call the First Island Chain. It's basically a defensive line of allies that helps contain China's navy and lets America project its power in the Pacific. MacArthur even said that if they ever lost Taiwan, the US defense line would have to fall all the way back to the coast of California. That's how important it is. All right, so with all this on the line, the obvious question is, why hasn't China just invaded and taken the island by force? Well, the answer is something you could call mutually assured economic destruction. An invasion would be so catastrophically expensive for everybody. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're insane. China's trade with just the US and the EU is almost $1.5 trillion a year. A war over Taiwan, that all goes to zero, overnight. It would trigger a global economic crisis that would make everything we've seen before look like a walk in the park. So the bottom line is, a real shooting war would be a complete disaster for everyone. It would vaporize those global supply chains, it would cripple the entire world economy, and, this is a big one, it would cut off China from the Western tech that it desperately needs to keep growing. And that, so far anyway, has been a price that's just way too high for anyone to pay. Which, of course, leads us to the million-dollar, or maybe trillion-dollar question. With the stakes this high, what happens now? What's the next chapter in this super delicate, super dangerous standoff? Well, the most likely answer seems to be that China just keeps playing the long game. Instead of a super risky invasion, Beijing's playbook is all about slow, steady pressure, politically, economically, hoping to just wear Taiwan down until reunification feels inevitable. It's the exact same patient strategy they used to get Hong Kong back from the British and Macau from the Portuguese. The strategy is wait, squeeze, and eventually absorb. But here's the thing. Taiwan has a front row seat to what happened in Hong Kong, and they saw how those promises of autonomy just kind of melted away. Plus, Taiwan has its own strong democratic identity, and, of course, that incredibly powerful silicon shield we've been talking about. So that leaves us with the final, critical question. In this high-stakes waiting game, where the prizes are technology, trade, and territory, who's going to play the long game better?